For 5 years, Emily Carter measured time in medication schedules, blood pressure readings, and the soft mechanical sigh of a hospital bed that had no place in a living room. The house in suburban Dayton, Ohio, once smelled like coffee and laundry detergent. Now it smelled like antiseptic wipes, nutritional supplements, and the faint metallic tang of medical equipment that hummed day and night. Emily had stopped noticing when the sound began. She only noticed when it wasn't there, when a power flicker or a loose cord made the silence feel dangerous. Daniel Carter lay at the center of everything. He had been a firefighter for nearly 15 years, the kind who ran into smoke without thinking twice, who lifted children from wreckage and waved away praise like it embarrassed him. Before the collapse, before the word paralyzed became a permanent echo in their lives, Daniel had been solid and loud and warm. He laughed with his whole chest. He smelled like smoke and soap. Emily used to joke that she always knew when he was home, because the air itself felt different. The collapse came on a Tuesday, ordinary, forgettable. Daniel had been tying his boots for an early shift when his hands stopped working, not trembling, stopping. He tried to stand and crumpled, his head hitting the kitchen floor with a sound Emily would never forget. The ambulance arrived fast. The hospital was efficient. Scans were ordered. Words were spoken softly in hallways. By nightfall, Daniel couldn't move anything below his neck. Doctors called it sudden spinal failure, a catastrophic neurological event. They spoke with the practiced calm of people who had delivered bad news many times before. Sometimes, one neurologist said gently, there is no clear cause. Another used the word irreversible. Emily latched onto that word and hated it instantly. It sounded final, like a door being shut. The weeks turned into months. The months stretched into years. The diagnosis didn't change, no matter how many second opinions Emily chased. Daniel was discharged with a prognosis wrapped in careful language but brutal truth. Permanent paralysis, minimal chance of improvement, focus on quality of life. Quality of life. Emily learned to hate that phrase too. She quit her job at the insurance office after burning through all her leave. They needed the income, but Daniel needed her more. She sold her car, then most of the furniture, then the spare bedroom set. Friends helped at first. Meals arrived. Cards piled up. But time wears down even good intentions. Visits became shorter, then rarer. Eventually, people stopped knowing what to say. Emily learned everything. How to lift without hurting him or herself. How to prevent bed sores. How to read his eyes when his voice grew too weak. How to smile while changing him, while cleaning him, while pretending she didn't see the humiliation flicker across his face when she had to do things a stranger once would have done in a hospital. Nights were the hardest. The house settled into creaks and pops as temperatures shifted. The street outside went quiet. Emily lay on the couch because the bedroom felt too lonely now, listening to the rhythm of Daniel's breathing. Sometimes it changed, slower, faster, uneven. She learned those patterns too, learned when to worry and when not to. Daniel rarely slept deeply. His eyes followed her whenever she moved, tracking her like he was afraid she might disappear. Sometimes she caught him staring at the ceiling, tears slipping silently into his hairline. He never cried out loud. He never complained. That somehow made it worse. They developed a system. 1 blink for yes, 2 for no. A long blink meant pain. Emily clung to those signals like a lifeline, but even they felt inadequate. There was so much Daniel couldn't say, so much trapped behind stillness. Doctors assured her his cognitive function was intact. He understands everything, they said, as if that was supposed to be comforting. Emily wondered, late at night, if that made it crueler. Ranger entered their lives long before the collapse. A German shepherd with alert amber eyes and a chest scar from a suspect's knife. Ranger had served 6 years as a police K-9 before retiring. Emily had met him when Daniel brought him home one afternoon, proud and grinning. He needed a calm house, Daniel said, and we needed a dog. Ranger had adored Daniel instantly, followed him room to room, slept at the foot of the bed. After the collapse, Ranger seemed to age overnight. He lay quietly during the worst days, watching strangers come and go, head resting on his paws as if guarding something fragile. When Daniel finally came home from the rehabilitation facility, Ranger changed. At first, Emily thought it was stress, the equipment, the unfamiliar routines, but Ranger positioned himself beside Daniel's bed and rarely moved. He didn't bark at the mail carrier anymore, didn't chase squirrels. He watched Daniel with an intensity that unsettled Emily, his ears twitching at every breath, every slight sound. "Easy boy," Emily whispered more than once, rubbing his head when he began to whine softly. The visiting nurse laughed it off. "Animals know when someone's sick," she said. "He's just worried." Emily wanted to believe that. But there were moments, small, strange moments, that didn't fit. Ranger would suddenly stiffen, lifting his head, nose hovering inches above Daniel's chest or neck. He would let out a low sound, not quite a growl, not quite a whine. Once, during a routine repositioning, Ranger barked sharply, startling Emily so badly she nearly dropped the bed rail. "Ranger," she snapped, heart pounding. The dog didn't look at her. He stared at Daniel. Emily apologized to the nurse, embarrassed, tired, always tired. She told herself she was imagining patterns where none existed. Grief does that, she knew, turns coincidence into meaning. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, not in the way the doctors described, not in the neat, closed-case way of charts and summaries. Something deeper, something unspoken. One night, after a long day of feeding, cleaning, and paperwork battles with insurance, Emily dozed off on the couch. She woke to the sound of scratching. Ranger stood beside her, pawing at her arm urgently. His eyes were wide, his body tense. "What is it?" she murmured, disoriented. Ranger didn't wait. He turned and trotted toward Daniel's bed, stopping only to look back and make sure she followed. Emily's heart sped up. Daniel lay exactly as she had left him, but Ranger stood on his hind legs, front paws braced on the mattress, nose hovering near Daniel's neck. He let out a sharp bark that echoed through the house. "Ranger, stop!" Emily rushed forward. As she reached the bed, she noticed Daniel's breathing was shallow, too shallow. His eyes were wide, panic flashing unmistakably. Emily lunged for the monitor. The numbers were climbing. Moments later, the alarm sounded. The nurse on call later said it was a temporary fluctuation, stress, positioning, nothing to worry about. Emily nodded and thanked her and pretended her hands weren't shaking. But when the house settled back into silence, Ranger refused to leave the bedside. He lay there, body pressed against the bed frame, eyes fixed on Daniel like a sentry who had just spotted something no one else could see. Emily sat beside her husband, holding his hand, staring at the dog in the dim light. For the first time in 5 years, a terrifying thought took root in her mind. What if Daniel wasn't beyond help? And what if everyone, including the doctors, had missed something that her police dog was desperately trying to show her? The morning sun barely penetrated the drawn blinds of the Carter household, but Emily was already awake. She hadn't slept more than a few hours at a stretch in years, her nights fractured by monitors, alarms, and the quiet whispers of worry. Ranger padded silently behind her, the soft thud of his paws on the worn wooden floor the only sound besides the rhythmic hum of Daniel's ventilator. The dog's eyes, sharp and alert, never left Daniel's motionless form. Ranger had been at his side for 5 years, loyal beyond measure. But recently, his devotion had transformed into something more urgent, more unsettling. Emily prepared breakfast carefully, reheating protein shakes and soft foods that Daniel could ingest without a struggle. She moved mechanically, following the routine she had perfected over countless repetitions. But every so often, Ranger would growl, low and warning, at the slightest movement Daniel made, or at the faintest irregularity in the monitor's beeps. Emily shivered despite the summer warmth. This wasn't a dog's usual behavior. She knew that instinctive sensitivity, but Ranger was trained. He wasn't guessing. He was alerting. Something was wrong, something critical, and Ranger was determined to make her see it. During the day, Emily continued her caregiving rituals, adjusting Daniel's pillows, gently turning him to prevent bed sores, monitoring his breathing, and administering medications on schedule. Yet the tension was palpable. Ranger never left Daniel's side. Even when Emily stepped into the kitchen for a sip of water or to check the mail, the dog's amber eyes tracked her movements before snapping back to Daniel, as if he were guarding a secret. It was impossible to ignore. By mid-afternoon, Emily was exhausted, but she refused to leave Daniel's side. She sat in a chair beside the bed, notebook in hand, attempting to log every small change in his vitals, every twitch of a finger or flicker of an eyelid. That was when Ranger did something entirely new. He climbed onto the bed with careful precision and pressed his snout against Daniel's shoulder. Emily gasped. The dog's eyes glimmered with a strange intelligence, almost accusing, as if to say, "Why are you ignoring this?" Ranger let out a short, sharp bark, then another, then a low, continuous growl that vibrated through Emily's chest. "Ranger, calm down," Emily said, but her voice trembled. I can't see what you see." The dog didn't budge. His growls were persistent, rhythmic, deliberate. Emily's heart thumped violently against her ribs. She felt a cold shiver snake up her spine. The air in the room seemed heavier, thick with unspoken urgency. She leaned closer to Daniel, her hand brushing his cold, unresponsive arm. Emily's mind raced. Was it pain? Was it breathing irregularities that even the monitors couldn't detect? "Ranger," she whispered, voice trembling, "what is it? What are you trying to tell me?" The dog's gaze never wavered, unwavering in a way that pierced her with a combination of awe and terror. For the first time, she wondered if he could sense something that the monitors, the tests, the specialists had all missed. That evening, Emily attempted to follow Ranger's silent cues more closely. Each time Daniel moved ever so slightly, Ranger's ears twitched. When a shadow crossed the room, a branch scraping the window pane, a car passing outside, Ranger did nothing. But when Daniel's chest shifted minutely, a fractional rise in his shoulder, Ranger barked sharply, demanding attention. Emily began to realize that this was more than instinct. It was detection, focus, precision honed from years on the force. Ranger wasn't just alert, he was diagnosing. The following night, Emily hardly slept at all. She lay beside Ranger on the couch, notebook clutched to her chest. Every half hour she recorded the dog's behavior, bark, growl, packing, pawing, the subtle angle of his head. A pattern emerged. Ranger's alerts coincided with slight variations in Daniel's breathing, tiny twitches along his neck and upper spine. Emily compared the times to the medical logs. Sure enough, Ranger's behavior predicted changes that the hospital equipment either missed or dismissed as inconsequential. Emily felt her chest tighten with a mix of fear and hope. Could it be that all this time, she had been missing what Ranger already knew? The next morning, Emily resolved to push further. She set up cameras to capture Ranger's behavior when she stepped away. She reviewed the footage obsessively. Each time Daniel's vitals faltered minutely, Ranger reacted instantaneously. Sometimes the growl was low, almost mournful. Sometimes he barked sharply, jumping to guard Daniel as if daring the world to interfere. The dog's devotion was no longer comforting, it was alarming. Emily realized she had been interpreting Ranger's loyalty as affection, when in truth, it might have been a life-saving alarm system. A system no human had deciphered until now. Later that day, Emily called the hospital, her voice unsteady but determined. "I need to speak with Daniel's neurologist," she said. I think we're missing something." She explained Ranger's behaviors, the patterns, the alerts. The receptionist hesitated. "Ma'am, he's been stable for years. Nothing new has shown up in his tests." Emily's throat tightened. "I understand, but this is different. My dog, he's detecting something wrong. You have to take it seriously." The response was polite but firm. The doctors could not act on a dog's intuition. Emily's blood boiled. 5 years of devotion, 5 years of careful attention, 5 years of nights spent awake, and now she was being told she was imagining it. She gripped Ranger's collar and knelt beside Daniel. The dog pressed his head against her arm, eyes sharp, unyielding. Emily whispered, "We'll figure this out. We have to." As the sun dipped behind the Ohio skyline, casting long shadows across the living room, Emily felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years: hope and fear. If she was right, if Ranger had detected something critical that every doctor had missed, it could change everything. But if she was wrong, the consequences would still haunt her. That night, as she lay in the armchair and Ranger curled protectively around Daniel's bed, a sudden, urgent bark echoed through the house. Ranger had fixed his gaze on Daniel's neck, growling insistently. Emily's heart stopped. She couldn't explain why, but she knew something had changed. Something invisible, something urgent. She leaned closer to Daniel, her hand trembling on his chest, her ear straining for any shift in his breathing. Ranger's growls grew louder, more insistent, and Emily's mind raced with terrifying possibilities. Was it an overlooked injury, a medical complication, something that could end everything tonight? The room felt impossibly still, every shadow elongated, every creak amplified. Ranger's eyes locked onto hers as if saying, "You have to act. Now." Emily's pulse thundered in her ears. She whispered Daniel's name, but he didn't respond. She reached for the phone, dialing the hospital in a frantic blur, only to hear the line ring with a hollow, mocking echo. Ranger barked again, sharper, louder, almost desperate. Emily's hands shook as she clutched the dog's fur, tears blurring her vision. She realized that for the first time in 5 years, Daniel's fate might hinge not on medical charts, not on doctors' opinions, but on the instincts of a retired police dog who refused to leave his side. And then, as Emily braced for the worst, Ranger did something she had never seen him do before. He grabbed Daniel's arm gently with his mouth, nudged it, and stared up at Emily with a look of pure insistence. "Notice this. Don't ignore it." Emily swallowed hard, heart pounding, and whispered, "All right, Ranger, I see it. I see it." In the shadows of the dimly lit living room, with the hum of machines and the weight of years pressing down, Emily understood that this night would change everything. Something critical had been hiding in plain sight for 5 long years. And Ranger had just revealed it. The following morning, Emily was restless before sunrise. Sleep had evaded her entirely, her body tense, heart pounding from Ranger's urgent alerts the night before. The dog lay rigid beside Daniel's bed, his amber eyes flicking to the slightest shift in Daniel's chest. Emily had spent hours reviewing the footage from the previous nights, meticulously documenting every bark, every growl, every pawing motion. A pattern was emerging, one that defied explanation. Ranger reacted consistently to subtle changes in Daniel's neck and upper spine, sometimes before any monitor alarm even sounded. Emily felt a mix of awe and fear. How could a dog detect what machines, tests, and doctors had all missed for years? She pored over the notebooks she had kept since Daniel's collapse. Each entry detailed his vitals, movements, and Ranger's reactions. At first, the correlation seemed coincidental, almost unbelievable. But as the logs mounted, it became undeniable. Every time Daniel experienced even the tiniest fluctuation in breathing or subtle muscular tremors, Ranger reacted instantly, sometimes barking, sometimes whining, sometimes packing anxiously. Emily's stomach churned as she realized what this could mean. Ranger was detecting something critical, something the doctors hadn't recognized. Determined, she called the neurologist's office again. "I've compiled a detailed report of observations from the past week," Emily said, her voice steady despite the tremor underneath. "Ranger, my dog, has been signaling subtle changes in Daniel's vitals. I need you to review this and consider further tests." There was a long pause. The nurse on the other end cleared her throat. "Ma'am, we appreciate your concern, but dogs can't diagnose medical conditions. Daniel has been stable for years. There's no indication for further testing." Emily's grip tightened on the phone. "Please, you have to see this. I'm begging you. I'm not imagining patterns. He's consistent, and he's not wrong." When the call ended, Emily's frustration burned hotter than her fatigue. Ranger nudged her hand with his nose, a gentle insistence that seemed to say, "We can't wait for them. You have to do something." Emily looked at him, her heart aching. The dog wasn't just loyal, he was relentless. She realized that she couldn't depend solely on doctors who had dismissed Daniel for 5 years. If Ranger was right, they could be missing something critical, something that might be reversible. Determined, Emily began digging into medical literature late into the night. The house was silent except for the occasional whir of the monitor and Ranger's quiet growls as he kept vigil over Daniel. Emily's laptop glowed with hundreds of pages of neurological case studies, research papers, and rare condition reports. Hours passed. Fatigue tugged at her eyelids, but she kept reading. Every obscure case, every mention of rare spinal or nerve injuries that mimicked paralysis, pulled her deeper into a terrifying realization. There was a subset of conditions that standard scans could miss entirely. Microfractures, high cervical nerve compressions, and subtle spinal cord lesions often masqueraded as irreversible paralysis. Emily's fingers trembled as she highlighted passages, her mind racing. If Daniel had one of these conditions, it could explain what Ranger was detecting. The dog wasn't barking at random. He was reacting to nerve signals, subtle muscle tension, and minuscule shifts in Daniel's posture. Emily felt a spark of hope she hadn't dared to feel in years. And yet, fear lingered. What if this is all wrong? The next day, she returned to the hospital armed with printed research and logs of Ranger's behavior. She requested an urgent meeting with Daniel's neurologist. "Please," she said, her voice shaking but determined, "I've documented observations for months. My dog is reacting to changes in Daniel's vitals and movements. There are medical studies showing rare conditions that can mimic paralysis. I believe Daniel is one of them. Please, just review the scans again." The neurologist studied her papers, flipping through pages with polite detachment. "Mrs. Carter, I understand your concern, but after years of observation and multiple scans, there's nothing we've missed. Your dog is remarkable, but it cannot replace medical imaging." Emily's stomach twisted with anger. Years of her life, 5 long years, had been spent caring for Daniel while the experts wrote him off. Her fists clenched. "Then let me pay for advanced imaging myself," she said. "I'll cover every cost. I just need you to look again. Please, my husband isn't broken beyond repair." The neurologist hesitated. He sighed, a mixture of weariness and reluctant curiosity. "Fine, we can schedule a specialized MRI, but understand it's a long shot. I don't want to raise false hope." Emily nodded, feeling the weight of every year pressing down. This was the first step toward uncovering the truth. At home, Emily watched Ranger with renewed attention. The dog seemed almost aware that progress was being made. He followed her from room to room, tail wagging faintly, eyes alert, ears perked at every sound. That night, Emily set up a small camera to record the session when she stepped out briefly to gather supplies. Ranger remained vigilant, packing the room and occasionally letting out low growls when Daniel shifted slightly. Emily knew that the footage would be crucial, proof that could not be dismissed as coincidence. Hours later, Emily reviewed the recording. Her breath caught in her throat. Ranger's behavior wasn't random. Every bark, every growl, every restless motion aligned perfectly with subtle, almost imperceptible changes in Daniel's muscles and respiration. She felt a shiver run down her spine. The dog had been signaling this for years. Every ignored alert, every dismissed instinct, was a piece of evidence that screamed for attention. That night, as Emily sat beside Daniel, running her fingers through Ranger's fur, she whispered, "We'll get it right this time. I promise." Daniel's eyes blinked once, a single motion for yes, their old code. Emily's chest tightened. 5 years of silence, 5 years of frustration, 5 years of being told nothing more could be done, and now, at last, a glimmer of possibility. But even as hope surged, fear lingered. If Ranger's intuition was correct, the consequences of delay could be catastrophic. Every hour mattered. Emily's mind raced through every contingency. What if the specialists confirmed the rare condition? What if surgery was risky or failed? What if Daniel's life hung in the balance while bureaucratic procedures and medical protocol dragged on? Ranger nudged her hand again, eyes wide, alert, insistent. It was a message she understood clearly now. Do not wait. Do not hesitate. This is urgent. Emily felt a mix of dread and determination as she realized that this dog, her husband's silent guardian, her partner in vigilance, might be the only reason Daniel still had a chance. Ranger had been right all along, and if Emily didn't act quickly, the opportunity could slip through their fingers, lost forever. She pressed her forehead against Daniel's arm and whispered, "We're going to find the truth. I promise." Ranger's growl softened into a low, contented hum, as if he understood the promise and was ready for the fight to come. But in the quiet that followed, Emily couldn't shake the question gnawing at the edges of her mind. What if the doctors are wrong? And what if Ranger is the only one who can save him? That thought lingered like a shadow in the room, a shadow that refused to fade. And as the night deepened, Ranger's eyes never left Daniel's face, sharp and alert, waiting for the next subtle signal that could change everything. Emily hardly slept that night. Her mind raced, replaying every subtle twitch, every faint breath that had triggered Ranger's relentless warnings. She had spent hours combing through medical journals and case studies, uncovering conditions so rare they were almost mythic: microfractures in the cervical vertebrae, nerve compressions high in the spinal column, lesions invisible to standard imaging, conditions mimicking total paralysis while leaving the mind fully intact. Every line she read made her heart pound. Could Daniel be one of these overlooked cases? Could all these years of helplessness, frustration, and fear have been based on a misdiagnosis? Morning sunlight crept through the blinds, illuminating the living room cluttered with medical papers, charts, and Emily's hastily scribbled notes. Ranger lay beside Daniel's bed, rigid as always, eyes fixed on his master, sensing every subtle shift in posture or breath. Emily studied the dog's behavior with renewed clarity. Ranger's reactions were no accident. They were precise, focused, a trained alert system attuned to changes no machine or human had noticed. She realized something that made her stomach turn. For 5 years, the only being who truly understood Daniel's body had been Ranger, and now it was up to her to convince the world. Emily made phone calls to specialists across 3 states, seeking someone willing to look at Daniel with fresh eyes. Most declined, citing risk, distance, or minimal chance of success. But eventually she found one doctor, a neurologist known for tackling rare spinal injuries, willing to review Daniel's case. The appointment was set for the following week. Emily hung up the phone, heart racing, and turned to Ranger. "We're going to need you, boy, more than ever." Ranger responded with a soft whine, nudging her hand with his nose as if acknowledging the gravity of the task. The next days were a blur of preparation. Emily contacted a medical transport company to arrange Daniel's transfer, packed the essentials, and coordinated with the local hospice team to provide backup care. Every step felt heavy, saturated with the tension of possibility and the terror of risk. Emily barely slept, packing the house at night, checking monitors, and constantly watching Ranger's reactions. Every twitch, every subtle growl, every bark felt like a message from an invisible world, one she could finally decipher. Finally, the day of the specialist appointment arrived. Emily, Daniel, and Ranger loaded into the van for the long drive. The weather was clear but crisp, the kind of late fall morning that made the air feel almost alive. Ranger sat beside Emily, alert, ears flicking toward every sound: car tires, distant sirens, the faint hum of the road. Emily's hands were clammy as she adjusted the blanket over Daniel. For the first time in years, she allowed herself a small, fragile hope. Perhaps this doctor would see what everyone else had missed. During the drive, Ranger became increasingly restless. He pawed at the side of the van, barked once sharply, then returned to his vigil, nose pressed near Daniel's chest. Emily's stomach tightened. She had learned to trust these signals. Something wasn't right. Minutes later, Daniel's breathing became uneven, shallow, and ragged. Emily's heart lurched. She pulled the van over immediately, calling emergency services as Ranger barked insistently, his body stiff and tense. Paramedics arrived within minutes, stabilizing Daniel as he teetered dangerously close to respiratory distress. Emily followed every instruction, hands shaking, heart pounding as Ranger remained vigilant, nose hovering near Daniel's neck, ears forward, growling low. The paramedics exchanged glances. "He's lucky you pulled over," one said. "Minutes could have made the difference." Emily nodded, tears pricking at her eyes. Ranger's insistence had saved him. She stroked his fur, whispering, "Good boy. You're not letting him go, are you?" The dog gave a low whine, as if affirming his silent vow. Finally, they arrived at the specialist's clinic. The doctor, a calm, deliberate man named Dr. Marcus Leland, welcomed them with a measured warmth. Emily explained Daniel's history, detailing every test, every hospital visit, every interaction Ranger had with him over the years. She laid out her research, printed copies of journals, her meticulous logs, and the recordings of Ranger's behavior. Dr. Leland listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions, eyes narrowing occasionally as he reviewed the footage and notes. Then came the scans. High-resolution, specialized imaging of Daniel's cervical spine. Emily and Ranger waited in the observation room, tension vibrating in the air like electricity. Ranger remained at Daniel's side, head low, growling softly at each subtle movement. Emily held his paw, whispering reassurances, but the knot in her chest tightened with every passing second. When Dr. Leland returned, his face was unreadable. Emily's heart sank. "We found it," he said quietly. "There's significant compression in the upper cervical vertebrae, microfractures that were missed in previous scans. The spinal cord itself is intact, but the pressure is causing the paralysis-like symptoms." Emily blinked, disbelief clashing with relief. "You mean he's not permanently paralyzed?" Her voice trembled. Dr. Leland nodded solemnly. "He's been trapped by a condition that is operable. It's high risk, but there is a real chance to restore function." Ranger barked, a sharp, triumphant sound that echoed in the clinic room. Emily felt tears slip down her cheeks as she clutched the dog's collar. The realization hit her with overwhelming intensity. For 5 years, Daniel's life had been reduced to survival mode, trapped in a body that wasn't as broken as the world had believed. And it had taken the instincts of a dog to reveal what years of medical expertise had overlooked. Dr. Leland's expression turned grave. "This is delicate. Timing is crucial. Surgery carries significant risk, including death or permanent loss of function. But if we act now," he trailed off. Emily's chest tightened at the weight of the words. She understood that the decision she faced could change Daniel's life, or endanger it entirely. That night, Emily sat beside Daniel, running her fingers over his cold hands, whispering fragments of reassurance and hope. Ranger rested his head on her lap, eyes glowing in the dim light, alert to every breath, every micro-movement, every unspoken signal. Emily whispered to him, "We're going to do this, Ranger. We're not letting him stay trapped any longer." The dog's tail thumped softly against the floor, a heartbeat in the tension-filled silence. But beneath the fragile relief, Emily felt the weight of impending risk. If the surgery failed, if Daniel's body couldn't withstand it, years of care, sacrifice, and love could be undone. And yet, the alternative, doing nothing, was no longer acceptable. Ranger had made that clear. As Emily drifted into a fitful sleep, she resolved to act with the urgency the dog had demanded. She would fight for Daniel with everything she had. And somewhere deep in her mind, a persistent fear whispered, "Time is slipping. Every second matters. One wrong move and it could all be gone." Ranger's low growl pulled her from sleep hours later. He stood rigid, eyes locked on Daniel's neck, a warning unspoken but impossible to ignore. Emily's pulse quickened. Something was shifting, something urgent. And in that quiet, tense moment, Emily realized that the next 48 hours would determine the rest of their lives, forever. The van hummed along the interstate, miles of asphalt stretching under a pale autumn sun. Emily gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white, while Ranger sat rigid beside Daniel's hospital bed, ears forward, eyes flicking between Emily and Daniel. Every so often, Ranger let out a soft whine, not of fear, but of insistence, a silent demand that Emily remain alert. Daniel lay strapped securely to the transport stretcher, ventilator humming steadily, but Emily's stomach twisted with anxiety. Every bump, every curve in the road, every slight shift in his chest could be critical. The stakes had never been higher. 5 years of careful caregiving, 5 years of watching over Daniel like a hawk, culminated in this journey. Emily had sold her wedding ring to fund the private specialist who had agreed to perform the advanced scans. Every dollar mattered. Every mile brought them closer to a diagnosis, a chance at recovery, or potentially devastating consequences. Emily's mind was a swirl of fear and hope, memory and imagination, as she navigated the interstate with precision. Ranger's eyes never left Daniel. Every bark, every shift, every low growl felt like a coded warning that Emily had learned to read. About 2 hours into the journey, a subtle change caught Emily's attention. Daniel's chest rose and fell unevenly. Ranger stiffened instantly, letting out a sharp bark that echoed in the van. Emily's heart jumped. She pulled the van over to the shoulder, sweat prickling her scalp, and reached for her phone to call emergency services. Ranger remained vigilant, pawing Daniel gently but urgently, nose pressed near his neck, growling low as if communicating in a language only he and Daniel understood. Paramedics arrived within minutes, assessing Daniel's breathing and stabilizing him. Emily followed every instruction, trembling, as Ranger hovered over the stretcher, growling at any movement that threatened Daniel's safety. One of the paramedics, a young man with kind eyes, whispered to Emily, "You did the right thing pulling over. Minutes can make a difference." Emily nodded, barely able to speak. Ranger's insistence had saved Daniel from what could have been a life-threatening complication. Emily knelt beside him, stroking his fur and whispering, "Good boy. You're not letting him go, are you?" The dog responded with a low, satisfied whine, eyes never leaving Daniel. Once Daniel stabilized, the van continued its journey. Emily's hands trembled on the wheel, but she refused to slow down. Time was no longer a simple measure of hours. It was an urgent countdown, each second a potential tipping point between life and death. Ranger remained vigilant beside Daniel, occasionally barking or growling at subtle changes in his posture. Emily realized with a mixture of awe and fear that Ranger had become more than a guardian. He was a living, breathing warning system, a sentinel whose instincts had been honed through years of police work. By late afternoon, they arrived at the specialist's clinic. Dr. Marcus Leland met them at the entrance, calm but visibly concerned. "Let's get him assessed immediately," he said, his tone precise, no nonsense. Emily and Ranger followed as Daniel was transferred to a private examination room. The atmosphere was tense, every step weighted with the history of missed diagnoses, dismissed warnings, and years of silent suffering. Ranger remained at Daniel's side, nose pressed near his chest, ears alert, growling softly at the faintest irregularity. Advanced scans began. High-resolution imaging of Daniel's cervical spine revealed what Emily had feared and hoped. There was significant compression, microfractures that had been missed by previous scans, and nerve damage causing paralysis-like symptoms. Dr. Leland's eyes narrowed as he reviewed the images. "This is operable," he said carefully, "but it's high risk. The spinal cord is intact, but any misstep during surgery could result in permanent loss of function or death." Emily's chest tightened. 5 years of neglect, 5 years of being dismissed, had led to this fragile, terrifying opportunity. Ranger let out a low bark, almost in triumph, as if understanding that the truth had finally been revealed. Emily sat beside Daniel, holding his cold, unresponsive hand, tears slipping down her cheeks. Ranger rested his head gently on her lap, still watchful, ears flicking to every subtle sound. She whispered softly to the dog, "We're here. We're going to fix this. You've been right all along." The dog responded with a low, contented growl, as if acknowledging her vow. Dr. Leland explained the procedure in detail. The surgery involved delicate decompression of the cervical vertebrae, a painstaking operation requiring precision and absolute focus. The risks were immense, but the potential rewards, a return of sensation, partial movement, even walking, were equally monumental. Emily's mind whirled. Every choice, every action, every careful observation from Ranger over the past 5 years had led to this moment. Failure was unthinkable. Success was nearly unimaginable after so long in the shadows of medical doubt. That night, Emily sat by Daniel's bedside in the hospital room, Ranger curled at the foot of the bed, eyes never leaving him. The steady hum of monitors filled the silence, punctuated by the occasional sigh or twitch from Daniel. Emily whispered fragments of hope, reassurance, and determination, feeling every nerve in her body taut with anticipation. Ranger, as if sensing the weight of the moment, let out a soft whine, pawing gently at Daniel's arm. Emily understood perfectly. The dog was warning her, reminding her that time was critical. Sleep eluded Emily. She dozed briefly in the chair, only to wake to Ranger barking sharply, alerting her to a subtle change in Daniel's breathing. Emily checked the monitors. A slight drop in oxygen levels. A subtle, almost imperceptible shift in his chest. She held her breath, adjusting his position carefully, grateful for Ranger's vigilance. Without him, she feared she would have missed it, that Daniel could have slipped into crisis before reaching the operating table. Hours later, Dr. Leland arrived to discuss timing. "We can operate now," he said, voice calm but urgent. "Delaying could worsen nerve damage, but it's high risk he could lose function or worse." Emily's mind raced. She glanced at Ranger, whose eyes met hers with unwavering focus. The dog's insistence over the years had brought them here, and now it was her decision to act. She swallowed hard, nodding. "Do it," she whispered. "We can't wait any longer." The surgical team began preparations. Emily kissed Daniel's forehead, whispered encouragement, and patted Ranger, who leaned into her hand for a moment before returning to vigilant watch. Emily felt the weight of every year of fear, hope, and determination pressing down on her. This was no longer just about diagnosis. It was about action, courage, and trust. Ranger had revealed what no human had noticed, and now it was time to act. As Daniel was wheeled into the operating room, Emily clutched Ranger's fur, whispering, "Stay with him, keep him safe." The dog let out a soft whine, eyes never leaving the door through which Daniel had disappeared. Emily sank into a chair outside the OR, heart pounding, mind spinning, every second stretching endlessly. She had followed a trail no one else saw, 5 years of instinct, dedication, and observation, and it had led to this room. But beneath the fragile hope, fear lingered. The next 10 hours would decide everything. Life or death, paralysis or movement, success or heartbreak. Emily gripped Ranger's paw tightly, tears slipping silently, and whispered one final promise. "We'll get through this. We're not letting him stay trapped any longer." And somewhere in the sterile, humming hospital corridor, Ranger's low, watchful growl echoed. A sentinel, a guardian, a witness to the moment that would change their lives forever. The fluorescent lights in the hospital hallway cast a harsh glare over Emily as she sat slouched in the uncomfortable chair outside the operating room. Her hands were clenched around Ranger's thick fur, feeling the warmth and solidity of him as he sat alert beside her. Hours stretched endlessly. Every faint beep from the monitor outside the OR made her pulse quicken. The room felt suspended in time, a corridor of waiting where every second carried a weight she hadn't known existed until this moment. 5 years of fear, frustration, and hopelessness condensed into 10 torturous hours. Emily tried to focus on her breathing, on the rhythm of Ranger's chest as he lay beside her. But her mind refused rest. Every thought returned to Daniel, his pale face, his unresponsive limbs, the life he had been living for half a decade in silence. She imagined the surgeon's steady hands, the delicate instruments threading through the fragile web of nerves and vertebrae, the tiny millimeters that could mean the difference between movement and permanent paralysis. She shivered. And yet, amid the fear, a flicker of hope burned. For the first time in years, there was a tangible possibility that Daniel might come back to her. Ranger, unusually tense, would occasionally rise, packing in a circle, then returning to Daniel's side in an almost ritualistic pattern. Emily followed the dog's movements with obsessive attention. She knew that every growl, every pawing motion, every sudden bark was an instinctual alert, a signal she had come to trust more than any machine or chart. She whispered to him, "I know, boy, I know. You've been right all along." Ranger let out a low, almost mournful whine, as if acknowledging her words but warning that the danger was not yet past. Hour 3 passed, then hour 4. Emily barely noticed the passage of time, the minutes melting together as she alternated between holding Ranger's paw and rubbing her own eyes in exhaustion. Her stomach was knotted, her muscles tight, but she refused to leave. She felt the room shrink around her, a cocoon of tension and anticipation. The scent of antiseptic from the oar seeped through the closed door, and every faint sound, footsteps, muted voices, the occasional clang of metal made her flinch. Ranger's ears twitched at every noise, every vibration, as if he were hearing signals beyond human perception. Hour 5 was the worst. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. A nurse passed by, glancing at her with a sympathetic smile. "She's been here all morning," she whispered to another nurse. "This is tough." Emily didn't respond. Her eyes never left the OR door. Ranger growled low, a sound that vibrated deep in Emily's chest. Something had shifted inside the operating room. She couldn't see it, couldn't know what it was, but Ranger could, and that was enough to make her pulse hammer in her ears. Hour 6 dragged on with agonizing slowness. Emily's mind cycled through memories of the last 5 years. Daniel's collapse, the endless nights, the sterile hospital rooms, the words of doctors dismissing hope. Every memory sharpened the fear and the urgency. And yet she also recalled Ranger, his vigilance, his insistence, his ability to sense what no human could detect. She realized then that she had relied on him more than she had admitted, more than she had understood. Ranger had been their unseen lifeline, the one constant in a sea of uncertainty. At hour 7, a nurse emerged briefly from the OR, her expression unreadable. Emily's stomach plummeted. She grasped Ranger's paw, her nails digging into his fur. The nurse approached cautiously. "Everything is stable, but there are complications. They're handling it." Emily's heart stopped. Complications. Her mind raced. She imagined every scenario, every possible outcome, every nightmare that could unfold. Ranger let out a sharp bark, breaking the tense silence, and Emily felt her chest tighten even further. The dog's alertness was a silent reminder that the danger was very real. By hour 8, exhaustion was a physical weight pressing on Emily. She hadn't eaten, hadn't slept, hadn't moved more than a few steps in hours. Ranger remained unyielding at Daniel's side, his amber eyes alert, ears forward, every muscle taut. Emily whispered, "We're almost there, boy. Hold on a little longer." The dog's low growl was almost approving, almost impatient. It was as if he were saying, "The critical part is coming. Stay ready." Hour 9 arrived, each minute stretching impossibly long. Emily's mind drifted, imagining what Daniel might be experiencing under the surgeon's hands. Pain, fear, confusion. She imagined his mind trapped in a paralyzed body, aware of everything yet powerless. A lump formed in her throat. Tears she had been holding back slipped silently down her cheeks. Ranger nudged her hand gently, reminding her she wasn't alone. His loyalty, his steadfastness became a lifeline. Emily took a shaky breath, grounding herself in the present, waiting for the final hour. Finally, the 10th hour arrived. The OR doors opened and Dr. Leland emerged, exhaustion etched across his face. Emily leapt to her feet, her heart pounding so violently it felt like it would burst. Ranger growled softly, his stance alert, sensing the tension, the unknown that hovered in the air. Dr. Leland's voice was calm, measured, but the gravity of the moment made Emily's pulse spike. "We've relieved the compression," he said carefully. "The procedure went as planned, but we won't know the full extent of recovery for days. He's stable but delicate. This is far from over." Emily's knees nearly buckled. Relief washed over her, sharp and dizzying, yet fear clung to the edges. She swallowed hard. 5 years of despair, of watching her husband trapped in a body that seemed beyond repair, had led to this moment. But stability was only the beginning. The next hours, days, weeks would determine whether Daniel could regain movement, regain independence, regain life itself. Ranger barked once, low and triumphant, then settled at Daniel's side, head resting on the bed as if guarding him through the recovery. Emily knelt beside him, running her fingers through the dog's fur. "You did it," she whispered. "You saved him." Ranger's ears flicked, eyes sharp, alert even in the aftermath of triumph. He had done more than guard, more than alert. He had been a sentinel, a silent force guiding them to this moment. As Emily sat in the quiet hospital room, the hum of monitors the only sound, she realized that the ordeal was far from over. Daniel's recovery would be painstaking. Sensation might return in fragments. Movement could be gradual, agonizingly slow. And yet the impossible was now possible. Emily allowed herself to imagine him blinking, moving a finger, lifting a hand. She allowed herself to hope. But as night fell and the city outside the hospital remained oblivious to the drama unfolding within, Emily felt a shadow of worry. What if something went wrong in the next few hours? What if unseen complications arose? Ranger lay rigid, ears twitching at every sound, body coiled for action. Emily knew instinctively that the dog's vigilance would not waver, not for a second. The two of them, dog and wife, were bound in a silent pact to see Daniel through this, no matter the risk. Hours passed, the monitors beeping steadily. Emily dozed lightly in the chair, Ranger's head resting in her lap. Every time Daniel twitched, every subtle rise or fall in his chest, Ranger responded instantly, nudging Emily awake, growling softly, demanding attention. Emily realized the truth. Without Ranger, she might have missed the earliest signs of complications, the first hints that could threaten Daniel's life. This dog had not only guided them to the operation, but now stood sentinel through its aftermath. At 3:17 a.m., a subtle but unmistakable change occurred. The monitor beeped differently, a spike in heart rate, a subtle twitch in Daniel's fingers. Ranger barked sharply, his body rigid, ears forward. Emily's pulse skyrocketed. She leaned close, eyes scanning every detail, hands trembling. The dog's instincts had never been wrong. Something critical was happening. Emily whispered, "Hold on, Daniel. We're right here. We're not leaving you." Ranger nudged Daniel's hand gently, a sentinel's touch, a guardian's insistence. In that quiet, tense moment, Emily understood that this was more than surgery. This was the moment where life itself had shifted, where the years of despair, the relentless vigilance, the love and sacrifice, all converged in a fragile, trembling hope. And somewhere deep in the hospital's sterile corridors, Ranger's low, watchful growl continued, a reminder that the fight was not yet over, and that the impossible had only just begun. The morning sun broke through the hospital blinds, streaking the room with pale gold light. Emily hadn't slept. Exhaustion clung to her like a heavy cloak. She sat rigid in the chair beside Daniel's bed, fingers intertwined with Ranger's thick fur. The dog's amber eyes, bright and unwavering, remained fixed on Daniel, ears twitching at every faint noise, every subtle movement. After 10 hours of surgery and a sleepless night of vigilance, the first hints of change were beginning to emerge. Emily had spent the entire night monitoring the machines, tracking every subtle twitch, every shallow rise and fall of Daniel's chest. And then, as the city outside remained oblivious to the drama inside, something miraculous happened. Daniel's fingers, pale and stiff, twitched slightly. At first, Emily thought she was imagining it, but Ranger barked sharply, a sound of insistence she had come to trust implicitly. She leaned closer, holding her breath, and saw it again, a faint, deliberate motion. One finger curling just slightly. Her heart pounded so violently she felt it in her throat. "Daniel," she whispered, voice trembling, no response. She waited, staring at his face, the same pale, silent visage he had worn for 5 long years. And then, ever so slowly, another twitch, a second finger, this time slightly stronger. Ranger growled softly, low in his throat, his tail flicking in a barely perceptible rhythm. Emily understood the message. He's responding. Watch him closely. Emily called Dr. Leland, her hands shaking. "He's moving," she stammered. "I think he's responding. You need to see this." The doctor arrived within minutes, reviewing Daniel's subtle movements with careful precision. "This is extraordinary," he said, eyes narrowing at the monitor and the patient. "These aren't reflexes, they're voluntary. We need to monitor him continuously, but if this continues, it's a sign that the surgery has succeeded in restoring nerve function." Hope surged in Emily's chest, sharp and intoxicating, but she didn't allow herself to relax. 5 years of neglect, 5 years of disbelief, 5 years of watching her husband trapped in a silent prison had taught her that miracles could be fragile. Every movement, every twitch had to be treated with caution. But even so, she allowed herself the smallest smile, leaning over Daniel's bed and gently squeezing Ranger's paw. "You were right," she whispered. "You knew. You've always known." Ranger responded with a soft, approving whine, nudging Daniel's hand as if offering encouragement. Throughout the day, Daniel continued to show signs of recovery. Small movements at first, fingers, wrists, slight shifts in his shoulders, but enough to ignite a spark of cautious optimism. Emily documented everything meticulously, recording every twitch, every slight motion, and correlating it with Ranger's reactions. The dog remained vigilant, growling softly or barking once when Daniel moved in a way that required attention. Emily realized that Ranger had not just predicted the surgery's necessity. He was now participating in Daniel's recovery, guiding them through the fragile early stages of restored function. By mid-afternoon, Daniel managed a tiny, deliberate blink, a motion so small it could have been mistaken for involuntary, but Ranger reacted instantly, pawing at Emily's hand. Emily leaned close to Daniel's face. "Daniel, can you hear me?" His eyes shifted subtly toward her. A single blink, one blink. A tear slid down Emily's cheek. After 5 years of communication reduced to codes and eye signals, this response felt like the world had shifted. Daniel was returning. The nurses and specialists watched in quiet astonishment as Daniel continued to respond. Dr. Leland reviewed the data, nodding slowly. "This is beyond anything I expected," he admitted. "The decompression relieved the nerve pressure precisely as needed. If this trajectory continues, he could regain significant function in the coming months. This is unprecedented in cases like his." Emily's chest tightened with relief and lingering anxiety. She understood that the journey was far from over, but the first step had been taken. Ranger's intuition had led them to this moment. That evening, Emily sat beside Daniel, tears streaming freely, stroking his hair and holding Ranger's paw. Ranger rested his head gently against Daniel's arm, eyes scanning constantly for any subtle shifts. Emily whispered, "You did it, boy. You kept him alive and now he's coming back to us." The dog let out a soft, low whine, almost triumphant, before settling back into his sentinel position. Emily knew that Ranger understood the significance of the day. For the first time in 5 years, there was hope that Daniel's body could reclaim its former strength. Over the next 24 hours, Daniel's movements grew gradually stronger. A finger flexed deliberately, a wrist rotated slightly, a shoulder shifted with effort but intent. Emily guided him gently through passive exercises recommended by the rehabilitation team, each movement accompanied by Ranger's attentive gaze. The dog's instincts remained sharp. He would nudge Emily or Daniel when a motion needed support, bark once when a shift in position required caution. Emily marveled at how perfectly Ranger's instincts synchronized with the delicate care required for recovery. By the second day, Daniel attempted a small movement of his arm, just an inch or two. Emily's hands trembled as she assisted him, guiding the motion carefully. Ranger barked softly, tail wagging faintly as if celebrating the milestone. Emily whispered through her tears, "You see, Daniel, he never gave up on you. He's been guiding us all along." Daniel's eyes blinked once, deliberately, in acknowledgement. The sight pierced Emily's heart with a mixture of joy and heartbreak. 5 years of waiting, 5 years of silent struggle, all culminating in this fragile, extraordinary moment. But even amidst triumph, Emily remained vigilant. Complications could arise, nerves could react unpredictably, and the recovery process would be slow and painstaking. Yet the impossible was now tangible. Daniel's body had responded, proof that the years of care, sacrifice, and unwavering vigilance had not been in vain. Ranger had been the invisible force that guided them to this miracle, the sentinel who refused to abandon his charge. As night fell, the hospital room was filled with a quiet intensity. Emily and Ranger remained by Daniel's side, watching every subtle motion, documenting each response, whispering words of encouragement. Ranger's eyes never left Daniel, ears forward, every muscle coiled for action. Emily realized that the journey of recovery would require all of their attention, all of their love, and all of Ranger's instincts. And in that quiet, sacred space, Emily understood the truth she had always known but had never articulated. Ranger had not just saved Daniel's life. He had restored their hope, guided them through despair, and proven that love and intuition could sometimes achieve what even the most advanced medicine could not. But even in this moment of fragile triumph, a shadow of suspense lingered. Recovery could falter, complications could arise. The delicate balance between hope and disaster remained. Emily tightened her hold on Ranger's paw, whispering, "We're in this together, all of us, and we're not letting go." The dog let out a soft, affirming whine, eyes locked on Daniel, guarding him as only a sentinel could. Outside the room, the world went on unaware, but inside, a family reunited with hope, guided by loyalty, perseverance, and the extraordinary instincts of a dog who refused to leave his post even in the darkest hours. The morning sun spilled gold across the hospital room, painting everything in warmth and quiet hope. Emily sat beside Daniel, exhausted but vigilant, holding Ranger's paw in one hand while gently brushing Daniel's hair with the other. It had been 3 days since surgery, and every hour had brought tiny miracles. Fingers flexed, wrists rotated, and shoulders shifted. Emily knew the road to recovery would be long and arduous, but for the first time in 5 years, Daniel's body was responding. And at the center of it all, steadfast and unwavering, was Ranger, the dog who had refused to leave his side, the guardian who had revealed what no one else could see. Emily watched Daniel closely as he attempted a deliberate movement, one finger lifted then another. His hand curled slowly around hers, tentative, unsure, yet purposeful. Tears sprang to her eyes, blurring her vision. She leaned closer, whispering, "You're doing it, Daniel. You're really doing it." Ranger's tail thumped softly against the floor, a quiet celebration of the progress, his ears twitching at every subtle change. It was as though he understood the significance of each small victory and wanted Emily to witness it fully. By mid-morning, Daniel managed to lift his forearm slightly, a feat that seemed impossibly small but monumental after 5 long years of immobility. Emily guided him gently, her hand steady despite her shaking chest. Ranger pressed his snout to Daniel's arm, nudging him ever so softly as if encouraging him to try again. Emily whispered, "He's helping you, Daniel. He's been with you all this time. You can do it." Daniel's eyes blinked slowly, deliberately, a silent affirmation that he understood, that he trusted, that he wanted to try. The room became a symphony of tentative progress. Emily carefully helped Daniel through small movements, each one met with a growl, a bark, or a nudge from Ranger, signals she had learned to read over years of companionship and vigilance. Every successful motion brought a swell of emotion, relief, joy, pride, and lingering fear. Recovery was fragile. One misstep, one strain, and it could all falter. But Emily refused to focus on fear. She focused on the present, on each incremental victory, and on the dog who had guided them here. By afternoon, Daniel's movements grew more pronounced. He flexed his fingers deliberately, wiggled his toes, and shifted his shoulders with effort but intent. Emily's chest swelled with pride, but she remained cautious. "Easy," she whispered. "Slowly, don't rush it." Ranger pressed his head gently against Daniel's arm, growling softly at any movement that seemed too sudden, alert to the delicate balance of recovery. Emily realized then that Ranger had become more than a guide. He was an active participant in the process, a silent coach whose instincts surpassed intuition and bordered on genius. Even the hospital staff, initially skeptical, began to witness the extraordinary. Nurses watched Daniel's slow but deliberate movements, exchanged quiet glances, and whispered among themselves. Dr. Leland reviewed the progress with awe, checking the monitors and carefully observing every motion. "This is beyond anything we could have predicted," he said softly to Emily. "The surgery was precise, yes, but the recovery, it's remarkable." and it seems almost assisted by his companion. Emily nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Ranger had been instrumental from the very start. Without him, Daniel might never have reached this point. As evening fell, Emily wheeled Daniel to a nearby chair for his first attempt at sitting upright. Ranger circled the chair once, then settled at Daniel's feet, tail flicking with anticipation. Emily supported Daniel's torso carefully, whispering encouragements. For a moment, Daniel wavered, his body trembling from effort, the fragility of years of immobility evident in every muscle. Ranger nudged Emily gently, then leaned against Daniel, pressing his weight as if to anchor him, to lend him strength. Slowly, painstakingly, Daniel straightened, sitting upright for the first time in half a decade. Emily's hands trembled as she held his shoulders steady, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You're sitting," she whispered, voice breaking with emotion. Daniel's eyes glistened with unspoken gratitude, and Ranger barked softly, tail wagging, a quiet triumph. The dog had been right all along. Every alert, every insistence, every night spent vigilantly guarding Daniel had led to this moment. Emily knew that the years of frustration and despair had not been wasted. They had been preparation for the miracle unfolding before her eyes. As night deepened, Emily guided Daniel through gentle movements in bed, helping him flex his fingers, rotate his wrists, and shift his arms. Each motion was met with soft growls, nudges, or barks from Ranger, who remained steadfast at Daniel's side. Emily whispered, "You see, Daniel, he's been with you every step, he never left. And now it's happening." Daniel's eyes blinked deliberately, a single tear sliding down his cheek, as though acknowledging not only Emily's love but Ranger's unwavering devotion. In the quiet hours, Emily allowed herself to imagine a future once unimaginable: walks in the park, laughter at the breakfast table, sunlight on Daniel's face, and the constant companionship of Ranger, ever watchful, ever loyal. The years of isolation, fear, and helplessness began to recede, replaced with fragile hope. Yet Emily remained vigilant, knowing recovery would be gradual, unpredictable, and fraught with challenges. But the first step, the monumental, impossible first step, had been taken. The next morning, Daniel could lift his hand fully, grasping Emily's gently. Ranger barked sharply, nudging his nose into Daniel's hand as if to say, "Yes, you can, keep going." Emily laughed softly through tears, her voice choked with emotion. "You did it," she whispered to both of them, "all of you." Ranger barked again, tail wagging furiously, and Emily knew that the dog understood the enormity of what had been achieved. A life once thought lost, restored through intuition, vigilance, and unwavering love. Months later, Daniel regained significant mobility, returning to activities once deemed impossible. Emily documented each milestone meticulously, always crediting Ranger, whose instincts had saved their lives long before surgery. The bond between them grew even deeper, a triad of love, trust, and loyalty, forged in crisis, hardened through adversity, and celebrated in triumph. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Emily wheeled Daniel into their backyard, the sunlight glinting off Ranger's coat. Daniel, still tentative but determined, flexed his fingers and took his first assisted steps in 5 years, Ranger padding beside him like a guardian angel. Emily's tears shimmered in the sun as she whispered, "We did it together." Ranger barked softly, nudging Daniel's arm, celebrating the miracle he had helped reveal. In that moment, Emily understood the full weight of what had transpired. 5 years of care, sacrifice, frustration, and hope had culminated in this cinematic, heart-stirring triumph. Ranger had been more than a dog. He had been a detective, a guardian, a healer, and a catalyst for a miracle that no human could have orchestrated alone. And as Daniel took his first confident steps, Emily, tears streaking her face, whispered to Ranger, "You never gave up. You saved him. You saved us all." The dog's tail thumped once, firmly and proudly, as if acknowledging that his mission was complete. The story that began in despair ended in triumph, a testament to love, perseverance, and the extraordinary bond between humans and the animals who guard them. Ranger had revealed what doctors missed. and in doing so, had rewritten the life of a family who refused to surrender to hopelessness. Hope, loyalty, and courage had prevailed. And in that backyard, beneath the golden sun, with Daniel moving again, Emily understood the most profound truth of all. Sometimes heroes come on four legs, with eyes that see what no one else can, and hearts that never, ever give up.